Welcome to the Pulsating Biology, where we were covering the topic for the Olevels, that is the human respiratory system. We have already talked about this in a much more detail, but for this video, we are going to talk about how the lungs are adapted for the efficient gas exchange in the human body. That comes into the human respiratory system. When you talk about such question, the first thing that arises in our mind is the structure that is termed as the alveoli. We have already discussed alveoli in a much more detail in the previous videos, but for this video, alveoli are basically the air sacs. These air sacs plays a very important role and are termed as the at the end and are placed at the end of the bronchioles. What is the purpose of alveoli and how they are adapted for being an efficient gas exchange system? All right. So alveoli are the air sacs. However, what as the question says is that how are the lungs adapted for the efficient gas exchange? And the answer for that is regarding the alveoli. When you talk about this, alveoli are basically numerous in numbers. There are numerous amount of alveoli that are present in a human lungs. When you talk about such structure that are present in numerous quantity, they have a similar function as well. And the major function for that is to provide a large surface area. The major function is to provide a large surface area, and the walls of those alveoli are basically almost one cell thick. What does it do? This provides a very short diffusion distance for all the gases, ensuring a very faster rate of diffusion. When you talk about diffusion, diffusion is nothing but just a transport mechanism in which the gases are transported from the region of higher concentration to the region of lower concentration down a concentration gradient. And in such a manner, when you talk about there would be a faster rate of diffusion if the alveolar wall is one cell thick, then we talk about it in such a manner that whenever there is a smaller surface area, the diffusion rate would always be faster than the one that have a larger surface area to volume ratio. Alright, other than that, when you talk about the walls, we say that the wall are almost one cell thick. Then, a thin film of moisture covers the surface of the alveoli. When you talk about alveoli, there are these certain sac-like structures, and a thin film basically cover those structures. What is the purpose for this? This allows the oxygen to diffuse into it and to dissolve into it. This thin film-like structure allows the oxygen basically to dissolve into it. And these walls of the alveoli are richly supplied by the blood capillaries. And this blood flow basically maintain the concentration gradient, which also helps us to perform the diffusion and to diffuse and dissolve in the oxygen and diffuse out the carbon dioxide. Now, this is the correct answer when you talk about the efficient gas exchange, and the major function or the major structure that is involved in the efficient gas exchange is the alveoli, as the alveoli provides a larger surface area that allows the much amount of the blood to be dissolved into it and build up the concentration gradient. Alright, so now let's talk about the gas exchange in a particular structure, that is the alveoli. As we have already spoken about it, that alveoli are the major structures that are present at the end of the bronchioles that helps us basically to dissolve in the oxygen and diffuse out the carbon dioxide. Now let's talk about how the gas exchange occurs inside the alveoli. Well, it occurs through the diffusion, that is the transport mechanism. The blood entering into the lung has a very low concentration. And the low concentration of what? That have a low concentration of oxygen and the high concentration of carbon dioxide. So whenever the air or any particle that is entering into the body that has a low concentration of oxygen and higher concentration of carbon dioxide, then the atmospheric air entering into the alveoli, into the lung. So what happens in that? In such a condition, the concentration gradient is built. This concentration gradient helps us to perform a mechanism that is termed as the diffusion. When you talk about this, carbon dioxide diffuses in the opposite direction of the alveoli. For example, if the oxygen is diffusing inside the alveoli, then we say that the carbon dioxide will be diffusing in the opposite direction, that will be dissolved outside the alveoli. In such a manner the mechanism takes place, and the gas exchange inside the alveoli is basically taking place in the human respiratory system that helps us basically dissolve in the oxygen. The oxygen and the carbon dioxide basically makes up the concentration gradient between the alveolar air and the blood. As we have already spoken about, inside the alveoli, it is richly supplied by the blood capillaries. All the blood capillaries are basically drained into the alveoli. What does this make? Well, this makes up the very continuous flow of blood throughout the blood capillaries and the movement of air in and out of the alveoli. That causes what? That causes the breathing. Breathing is the mechanism of moving the air inside and out. So whenever the oxygen is diffused inside and carbon dioxide is diffused outside, or whenever it is vice versa, that the carbon dioxide is diffused inside and oxygen is diffused outside, we say that the mechanism takes place that is termed as the breathing.